Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. My grandmother used to tell me that some places remember things they shouldn't. Growing up in Tromsø, I'd sit by her wood stove while Arctic winds rattled the windows, listening to her stories about the darkness that lives in Svalbard. She'd describe a concrete entrance carved into permafrost, where humanity stored its final hopes. "The seeds aren't the only things sleeping there, Magnus," she'd whisper, her weathered hands clutching mine. "That place, it dreams of endings." I thought they were just stories to keep a restless kid quiet during the long polar nights. But the nightmares started when I turned 8. Always the same. Walking through endless white tunnels lined with metal shelves, hearing whispers in languages that predated words. I'd wake up tasting copper and soil, my sheets drenched in sweat that smelled like wet earth. The dreams stopped when I hit 19, right around the time I dropped out of UIT Arctic University and started drinking myself into debt. By 25, I burned through 3 jobs in Tromsø and owed more kroner than I'd seen in a decade. That's when my cousin Eric called from Longyearbyen, offering work at the Global Seed Vault. "Security position," he said. "Decent pay, full benefits. They're desperate for someone with your background." I'd never told Eric about my degree in archaeology or my thesis on pre-Christian burial practices in the Arctic. How did he know about that? The flight to Svalbard in February felt like stepping backward through time. As our twin otter descended through gray clouds, I saw it, the vault's entrance jutting from the mountainside like a steel tooth. My stomach dropped. It looked exactly like my childhood nightmares. Longyearbyen, the world's northernmost settlement, exists in permanent twilight during polar night. Population: 2,100 souls, and counting. The town operates under strange rules. No births, no deaths, no cats, no soil from the outside. Bodies don't decompose here. They're preserved in permafrost, like everything else. But the vault sits outside town limits, where different rules apply. My first week, I stayed at Mrs. Jensen's guest house on Postbox Street. She was a short woman with eyes like winter lakes, who served reindeer stew and kept talking about the old agreements. When I mentioned my new job, her face went pale. "Your grandmother was Astrid Henriksen from Tromsø, wasn't she?" she asked. I nodded, surprised she knew. "She visited here once in the 80s, left something in my cellar." Mrs. Jensen disappeared downstairs and returned with a wooden box carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Inside, wrapped in sealskin, was a journal filled with grandmother's spidery handwriting. The last entry was dated the day before she died. "Magnus will understand when the time comes. The vault chooses its guardians." That night, I read about expeditions that predated the seed vault by decades, about caverns beneath the permafrost where indigenous peoples once stored more than grain. Grandmother wrote about finding artifacts, carved bone tools, stone tablets, objects that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Objects that made sounds in the dark. The nightmares returned that evening, but now they felt less like dreams and more like memories I'd never made. My first day at the Global Seed Vault began at 6 p.m., when perpetual darkness made time feel like a broken concept. The facility coordinator, Dr. Anya Volkov, met me at the main entrance, that triangular steel and concrete monument I'd seen in documentaries and nightmares alike. "Welcome to humanity's backup plan," she said in accented English, her breath forming clouds in the -40 air. Russian, maybe Estonian. She was younger than I'd expected, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made you feel like she was cataloging your flaws in real time. The entrance tunnel stretched deeper into the mountain than any photo had suggested. Our footsteps echoed off polished concrete walls, past steel doors marked with biohazard warnings and access codes I couldn't read. Emergency lighting cast everything in amber, creating shadows that seemed to shift just outside my peripheral vision. "Your predecessor lasted 6 months," Dr. Volkov said casually, adjusting her tablet as we walked. "Jackson Brewster, American exchange student. Found him in Section C7, catatonic. Kept mumbling about growing voices and pointing at empty shelves. What happened to him? Medical evacuation to Oslo. Complete psychological break. He insisted the seeds were speaking to him in his native language." She paused by a heavy security door. Curious thing, Jackson was from Minnesota, spoke fluent Lakota thanks to his grandmother. The doctors couldn't explain why he thought plants were communicating in an indigenous language. The main chamber opened before us, like a cathedral of preservation. 3 tunnels branched off from a central hub, each one descending deeper into permafrost. Thousands of steel shelves lined the walls, holding silver packets of seeds from every corner of Earth. The air tasted sterile but carried an undertone of something organic, like soil after rain. "Your station is here." Dr. Volkov indicated a desk positioned at the junction of all 3 tunnels. Computer terminal, radio, emergency phone. The night shift is quiet, usually. She handed me a laminated card. "Your rules. Memorize them. Follow them exactly. No exceptions. No interpretations. Night guard protocols. Small barred global seed vault. Conduct rounds every 2 hours starting at 8 p.m. Follow the designated path. Tunnel A, Section A1 through A12, return to Central Station. If you hear knocking from inside the walls, ignore it. The permafrost settles. Nothing more. Seed packets occasionally fall from shelves. If a packet falls, place it on your desk. Do not attempt to reshelve it yourself. During your midnight round, if you find the temperature gauge in Section A7 reading above -18 degrees Celsius, immediately call Dr. Volkov. Do not investigate further. The emergency exit in Tunnel C should always be locked. If you find it open, close it immediately and report to security. If you encounter another person during night hours, ask for their clearance code. If they cannot provide one or seem confused, escort them to the exit. The seed samples in Section B9 require daily moisture monitoring. If the humidity levels exceed 60%, adjust the controls manually. Never enter the storage areas marked with red warning signs without Dr. Volkov present. If equipment malfunctions, note it in the logbook. Contact maintenance only during daylight hours. At the end of your shift, tally all seed packets that fell during the night. Record the total in the daily log. Seems straightforward enough, I said, pocketing the rules. Dr. Volkov's expression darkened. "Mr. Henriksen, this isn't a typical security job. We preserve more than seeds here. Some collections predate the official vault by decades. Samples gathered by expeditions that found unusual specimens. The permafrost doesn't just preserve, it amplifies certain properties we don't fully understand." "What kind of properties?" "Your predecessor began his shift normally. Week 1, minor incidents, a few fallen packets, some temperature fluctuations. Week 3, he reported whispers during rounds. By month 2, he claimed certain seeds were responsive to human proximity. Month 6, we found him sitting cross-legged in front of a shelf of heritage corn specimens from the American Southwest, speaking fluent Lakota to seed packets that had supposedly been chattering back." I wanted to laugh, but her dead serious tone killed the impulse. "You're saying the seeds were talking?" "I'm saying that permafrost does strange things to organic matter. We've documented electromagnetic anomalies, unusual sound patterns, temperature variations that follow no logical pattern. Whether that constitutes communication is above my pay grade. She moved toward the exit, then turned back. Your grandmother's journal mentioned this place. She understood something we're still trying to figure out. Maybe that's why you're here. The heavy door sealed behind her with a sound like a coffin closing. I settled at my desk and examined the computer terminal. Basic security monitoring. Cameras, temperature sensors, humidity levels. 3 screens showed the tunnels in grainy night vision. Everything looked exactly as it should. Neat rows of steel shelving stretching into darkness, labeled packets organized by species and origin. My first round at 8 p.m. went without incident. The tunnels were colder than the central chamber, my breath visible in thick plumes. Emergency lighting created pools of amber warmth every 10 meters, leaving broad spaces of shadow between. My footsteps sounded wrong in the confined space. Too echoey, as if the sound was bouncing off surfaces that weren't there. Section A7 housed Arctic specimens, grains from northern Canada, berries from Siberia, root vegetables from Greenland. The temperature gauge read a steady minus 20 degrees Celsius. Normal. But as I walked back toward the central station, I heard something that made me stop mid-step. A faint rustling like paper being shuffled. Then, softer still, what sounded almost like whispering. I stood perfectly still for 30 seconds, listening. Nothing. The first fallen seed packet was waiting on my desk when I returned, a silver pouch labeled Zia Mays, Peru, collected 1978. I set it aside and noted the time in my logbook. According to the rules, normal procedure. The 10 p.m. round started normally. I'd settled into a rhythm, checking each section methodically, noting temperatures, watching for falling packets. The silence felt heavier now, like the mountain itself was holding its breath. In Section A3, I found 2 more packets on the floor, both from Central America, both dated 1978. Strange coincidence, but I dutifully collected them and continued my circuit. That's when I heard my name. Magnus. I froze in Section A9, the word echoing off concrete walls. Clear as daylight, spoken in a voice I almost recognized. My grandmother's voice. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish. The emergency phone buzzed against my hip, but when I checked it, no incoming calls, just static on all frequencies. I completed the round quickly, depositing 3 more fallen packets on my desk. All from 1978. All from regions my grandmother had written about in her journal. By midnight, I had 7 packets waiting. The coincidences were piling up like snowdrift. The midnight round took me deeper into Tunnel A than before. Section A12 housed the oldest specimens, seeds collected in the 1970s from indigenous communities worldwide. The temperature gauge in A7 still read normal, but the air felt different here. Thicker, like breathing through wet cotton. In A11, I discovered something that made my skin crawl. The shelf labels were different. Instead of standard scientific classifications, handwritten cards in various scripts hung from the shelves, some in English, others in languages I'd never seen. But one caught my attention immediately. A label written in the same spidery handwriting as my grandmother's journal. Hordeum spontaneum, collected Svalbard expedition, October 1983. Warning: exhibits nocturnal activation. Handle with extreme caution. 3 years before the official vault opened, I reached for the packet, then stopped. Rule 8 specifically mentioned red warning signs. This shelf had a small red triangle I'd missed on previous rounds. That's when I noticed my breath wasn't forming clouds anymore. The temperature here felt warmer, despite the gauge reading normal. I checked my watch. 12:47 a.m. Time to head back. But Section A12 wasn't where I'd left it. The tunnel stretched further than before, disappearing into darkness that my flashlight couldn't penetrate. New shelves lined the walls, shelves that hadn't been there 20 minutes ago. The labels were all handwritten, all in scripts I couldn't read. I backtracked quickly, following the amber emergency lights toward the central station. But the lights seemed different, dimmer, more orange than before. And some were flickering in patterns that almost looked deliberate. When I reached my desk, 15 seed packets were waiting in a neat pile. I hadn't collected 15 packets. My hands shook as I logged the incident, noting the time and description. The computer screen flickered once, briefly showing what looked like security footage from a different part of the vault. A section with stone walls instead of concrete, where figures in heavy parkas moved between ancient-looking storage containers. Then the screen returned to normal. The 2 a.m. round changed everything. I followed the designated path, but Tunnel A led somewhere new entirely. The concrete walls gave way to rough-hewn stone, and the air smelled like centuries of accumulated earth. Emergency lighting became torches, actual burning torches in iron sconces. This wasn't the global seed vault anymore. The storage shelves here were carved from stone, holding not modern packets but clay vessels, bone containers, and bundles wrapped in hide. Labels hung on sinew cords, written in symbols that hurt to look at directly. And I wasn't alone. Figures moved between the shelves, people in traditional Arctic clothing, faces obscured by fur-lined hoods. They paid no attention to me, going about their business with quiet purpose. One woman, elderly and walking with a carved staff, stopped in front of a shelf and began singing in a language that predated words. I recognized her voice. "Grandmother?" She turned, and though her face was younger, perhaps 40 years younger, I knew those Winter Lake eyes. Astrid Henriksen, my grandmother, as she might have looked during her mysterious expedition in 1983. "Magnus," she said, her voice carrying the weight of across decades. "You came back." "Back? I've never been here before." "Haven't you?" She gestured to the stone shelves around us. This is where it began, before the global seed vault, before the treaties and protocols. Indigenous peoples used these caverns for millennia, storing seeds that carry more than genetic material. She led me to a shelf carved with spiral patterns. The containers here pulsed with faint light, and I could swear I heard whispers emanating from within. "Seeds of memory," she explained. "Not just plants, but the knowledge of how to survive endings. Your predecessor understood too late. The modern vault is built on top of something much older. The permafrost doesn't just preserve organic matter. It preserves intentions, purposes. But how are you here? You died 5 years ago. Time works differently here. The seeds remember everything. Who planted them, why they were saved, what they were meant to survive. I've been waiting for you to understand." She pressed a clay vessel into my hands. It felt warm despite the cold air, and the symbols carved into its surface seemed to move under my touch. "The rules Dr. Volkov gave you. They're to protect the upper vault from what's down here. But you're not just a guard, Magnus. You're a translator. The seeds speak to those who can hear them, and your bloodline. We've always been listeners." The whispers from the vessel grew louder, resolving into something almost like words. Not English, not Norwegian. Something older. The language my dreams had taught me, without my knowing. "What do they say?" "They're counting down," she whispered. "Something is coming. Something that will require these older seeds, these older ways of surviving. The modern vault preserves genetic diversity for climate change and war. But what's sleeping here prepares for something worse." The stone chamber began to fade around the edges, concrete walls bleeding through stone like watercolors in rain. "Wait," I called out. "I don't understand." "You will. Follow the fallen packets. Read the old labels. And remember, not all rules are meant to be followed. Some are meant to be understood." I blinked and found myself back in Section A12 of the modern vault. Concrete walls, steel shelves, LED emergency lighting. My watch read 2:03 a.m. I'd been gone 3 minutes, according to the timestamp. But the clay vessel was still in my hands. When I returned to my desk, 37 seed packets were waiting. The pile had grown while I was gone, and now I could see a pattern. They weren't falling randomly. They were being selected, arranged. I spread them out, noting the collection dates, locations, and species. When arranged by date, they formed a rough map. When arranged by location, they told a story of indigenous migrations. When arranged by species, they spelled something out in a script I was beginning to recognize. The script from my grandmother's journal. The script on the clay vessel. The script that seemed to be teaching itself to me, one symbol at a time. I looked up at the security monitor showing Tomoe. In the grainy night vision, shadows moved between the shelves that shouldn't have been there. Not people. Something else. Something that flowed like liquid darkness but cast no shadows of its own. My radio crackled with static, then resolved into whispers in that ancient language. A countdown, just as grandmother had said. But counting down to what? I opened her journal to a page I'd somehow missed before. Her handwriting, but in modern ink. Day 1. Madness begins his shift. The vault recognizes its own. 73 days until convergence. The page was dated today. I spent the rest of my shift studying the clay vessel and arranging the fallen packets. By 6 a.m., 49 seeds had appeared on my desk. Each one corresponded to a location in grandmother's journal. Each one part of a larger puzzle I couldn't yet comprehend. Dr. Volkov arrived early, her usual punctuality disrupted by something that looked like concern. "Magnus, we need to talk." She gestured for me to follow her past the security checkpoint, into an office I hadn't known existed. The walls were lined with photographs from various expeditions, teams in parkas standing before ice formations, indigenous guides pointing at cave entrances, aerial shots of Svalbard from decades past. "Tell me about your night," she said, settling behind a desk cluttered with scientific journals and what looked like anthropological texts. I described the fallen packets, the strange voices, the temperature fluctuations. I didn't mention the stone chamber or my grandmother's ghost. Some things felt too fragile to speak aloud. 49 packets. She made a note. Always odd numbers. We've been tracking this pattern for months. It corresponds to lunar cycles, but not Earth's moon. What do you mean? She opened a thick folder marked Classified Svalbard Deep Storage Project. Inside were photographs, diagrams, and reports dating back to the 1970s. The images showed caverns beneath the modern vault, carved chambers filled with stone shelves and artifacts that predated written history. The official Global Seed Vault opened in 2008, she explained. But we've been here longer. Much longer. The indigenous Sami people called this place Salar, the resting place of sleeping voices. Norwegian geological surveys in the 60s discovered something they shouldn't have. She showed me a photograph from 1967, a team of miners breaking through permafrost into a massive underground chamber. The chamber walls were carved with spirals and symbols that hurt to look at directly. They found a network of caverns that shouldn't exist, chambers carved from living rock, with evidence of human habitation dating back 12,000 years, seed storage containers that predated agriculture, tools made from materials that don't exist in nature, My hand instinctively went to the clay vessel in my jacket pocket. The modern vault was built as cover? The modern vault has a dual purpose. Yes, we preserve seeds against climate change and catastrophe, but we also monitor and contain what's beneath. The indigenous storage system never stopped working, Magnus. It's still active. Still aware. She pulled out a seismic reading chart, showing steady vibrations emanating from deep beneath the vault. The patterns looked almost rhythmic, like a massive heartbeat. Your predecessor started displaying unusual language capabilities after his first week. By month 2, he was fluent in pre-Columbian indigenous languages he'd never studied. He claimed the seeds were teaching him. Teaching him what? How to listen, how to translate, how to prepare. She leaned forward. Magnus, we didn't hire you randomly. Your grandmother's research, your archaeological background, your family connection to this place. We've been waiting for you. Before I could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the facility. We rushed back to the central chamber, where emergency lights bathed everything in red. Dr. Volkov quickly accessed the computer terminal while I checked the security monitors. Tunnel C showed massive temperature fluctuations. The emergency exit, the one that should always be locked, stood wide open, and beyond it, I could see something that defied explanation. The tunnel continued past where the vault blueprints said it should end. The walls were stone instead of concrete, and a pale blue light emanated from somewhere deep within. Section B9 is showing humidity levels at 89%, Dr. Volkov reported. That's impossible. And look at this. She pointed to a readout showing electromagnetic activity far beyond normal parameters. I need to check B9, I said, remembering the rules about humidity monitoring. Absolutely not. We're sealing the facility and calling in the research team. But as she reached for the phone, it rang. The caller ID showed a number that shouldn't exist. The emergency line from section B9. She answered, then went pale. The voice on the other end was speaking rapidly in what sounded like multiple languages at once. I caught fragments. English, Norwegian, and something else. Something older. Who is this? Dr. Volkov demanded. The voice responded, and this time I understood every word, though it spoke in that ancient language from my visions. The stored knowledge awakens. The countdown reaches 67 days. The translator must come below. Dr. Volkov looked at me in shock. How did you understand that? I don't know. But I did know. The clay vessel in my pocket was warm against my chest, and the symbols carved into its surface were pulsing with soft light. Against protocol, against Dr. Volkov's protests, I headed for Tunnel C. The open emergency exit led to a corridor I'd never seen on any vault diagram. The stone walls were covered in carvings that seemed to shift and change as I watched. My flashlight beam revealed chambers branching off the main passage, each one filled with ancient storage vessels, similar to the one in my pocket. I followed the blue light deeper into the mountain. The passage opened into a vast chamber that took my breath away. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, and the walls were lined with thousands of carved alcoves. Each alcove held clay vessels, bone containers, and bundled packages wrapped in materials I couldn't identify. But what dominated the chamber was the circle in the center. 50 standing stones arranged in a perfect spiral, each one carved with symbols that seemed to glow from within. At the center of the spiral sat a figure I recognized, the elderly woman from my vision, my grandmother as she was 40 years ago. Except, this wasn't a vision. You came quickly, she said, standing to greet me. Her voice carried across the chamber despite the distance between us. I was afraid the modern vault would contain you too long. Grandmother, you're dead. I attended your funeral. Death is just another form of storage, she replied, gesturing to the vessels around us. The seeds preserve life, but this place preserves something more: memory, knowledge, purpose. I've been waiting here since 1983, preparing for what comes next. She led me into the spiral of stones. As we passed each one, I felt a vibration that seemed to resonate in my bones. The symbols on the stones were teaching themselves to me, meaning flooding my mind without conscious effort. The Sami people weren't the first to use these caverns, she explained. This place was built by people who survived the last great convergence, a planetary event that happens roughly every 12,000 years. Climate shifts, magnetic pole reversals, mass extinctions. But not random. Cyclical. We reached the center of the spiral, where a stone pedestal held an ancient map carved in the rock. The continents were shown in positions I didn't recognize, and symbols marked specific locations around the globe. The modern seed vault preserves genetic diversity, but these older collections preserve something else: the knowledge of how to restart civilization after total collapse. Seeds that can grow in poisoned soil, plants that can survive radiation, grains that carry the memory of how to rebuild. She pressed her hand to the stone map, and it lit up with lines of connection between the marked sites. I recognized some locations: Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, certain caves in New Mexico, remote valleys in the Himalayas. Sites like this exist worldwide, connected through underground chambers that shouldn't be possible. The people who built them knew what was coming. They prepared. And now it's happening again? The countdown isn't arbitrary, Magnus. 67 days until the convergence begins. The modern world will end, just like the last one did. But the seeds remember. The knowledge persists. She handed me another clay vessel, this one larger and covered in spiral carvings. Your job isn't to guard the modern vault. It's to prepare for what comes after. To learn the old languages, understand the old knowledge, and help humanity survive what's coming. The chamber began to shake. Not an earthquake. Something deeper, more rhythmic, like the mountain itself was breathing. What about Dr. Volkov? The research team? Some know, some suspect, some are preparing. The vault has many levels, Magnus, many purposes. You've seen only the beginning. She gestured to the vessels lining the walls. Thousands of them, each one glowing with faint internal light. Each one containing seeds that were so much more than genetic material. Take this back to your station. Study the fallen packets. They're not random. They're lessons, messages, preparation for what's coming. The vibrations grew stronger. Dust fell from the ceiling as something massive shifted far beneath us. I have to go back, I said. You have to go up, she corrected. But remember, you're not just a guard anymore. You're a translator, a teacher, a bridge between what was and what will be. I made my way back through the stone passages, the two clay vessels warm against my body. The blue light faded behind me, and soon I was back in the familiar concrete corridors of the modern vault. Dr. Volkov was waiting at the emergency exit, her face pale with worry. Magnus, thank God. How long were you gone? I checked my watch. 7:15 a.m. About 20 minutes? 20 minutes? Magnus, it's past noon. You've been gone for 5 hours. I looked outside. Sure enough, the brief Arctic daylight was already fading. I'd lost an entire morning in what felt like minutes. What happened down there? I wanted to tell her everything, but something held me back. Instead, I showed her the clay vessels. I found these, and I think I understand what's really happening here. She examined the vessels with growing excitement and fear. These artifacts, they shouldn't exist. The age, the craftsmanship, the materials. Magnus, these could revolutionize our understanding of Arctic civilizations. They're more than that, I said. Dr. Volkov, how much do you really know about why this vault was built? Her expression darkened. More than I wish I did. Come on, it's time you met the rest of the team. Dr. Volkov led me through a service corridor I'd never noticed, past the main vault chambers to a heavy blast door marked Authorized Personnel Only. She pressed her palm to a scanner, and the door opened with a pneumatic hiss. Beyond was a facility that belonged in a science fiction film, not beneath Arctic permafrost. Multiple levels connected by glass walkways overlooked a central chamber where teams of researchers worked at stations filled with equipment I couldn't identify. The walls were lined with monitors showing seismic readings, electromagnetic measurements, and what looked like star charts. "Welcome to the Deep Storage Research Division," Dr. Volkov said. "This is the real reason the vault exists." We descended to the main floor where researchers looked up from their workstations. I recognized the focused intensity of academics wrestling with problems that kept them awake at night. But their equipment was far beyond standard geological or biological tools. Dr. Chen, Dr. Nakamura, Dr. Okafor, meet Magnus Henriksson, our new translator. Dr. Chen, a slight woman with paint-stained fingers, looked up from what appeared to be digital reconstructions of cave paintings. "Finally, we've been trying to decode the vessel inscriptions for months." "Translator?" I asked Dr. Volkov. "We know about your family history," Dr. Nakamura interjected, his English crisp with a Japanese accent. "Your grandmother wasn't the first Henriksson to work with us. Your great-grandfather, Lars Henriksson, was part of the original 1967 expedition. The ability seems to run in bloodlines." Dr. Okafor, a tall Nigerian man with intense eyes, gestured to his workstation. "We're tracking convergence indicators worldwide, electromagnetic anomalies, seismic patterns, unusual aurora activity, all building toward the same timeline your grandmother predicted." He showed me a global map with pulsing markers at various locations: Turkey, New Mexico, Tibet, Easter Island, Antarctica. Sites scattered across continents, but connected by lines of energy that formed complex geometric patterns. "Every marked location contains storage chambers similar to what you found below," Dr. Volkov explained. "Ancient preservation sites hiding knowledge meant to survive civilizational collapse. But they're all activating simultaneously for the first time in recorded history." Dr. Chen handed me a tablet showing high-resolution scans of clay vessels identical to the ones I'd found. The symbols carved into their surfaces seemed to move as I watched, rearranging themselves into patterns that made sense to parts of my brain I didn't know existed. "Your predecessor, Jackson, could read some of these inscriptions," she said. "But you, the symbols respond to you directly. Look." She placed one of the original vessels, not mine, but one from their collection, on the table between us. As I focused on it, the carved symbols began to glow with soft light, shifting and changing until they formed readable text. Not in English or Norwegian, but in that ancient language that my mind somehow understood. "The fifth convergence approaches. Those who carry the old blood must prepare the continuation protocols. The sleepers will wake when the stars align, as they did in the time of the Great Guying." "Remarkable," Dr. Nakamura whispered. "The vessels have never responded so clearly before." "What are the continuation protocols?" I asked. Dr. Volkov pulled up a series of documents on a nearby screen. "Based on our research, they appear to be instructions for preserving human civilization through catastrophic change. Not just seed preservation, but knowledge, technology, culture. Everything needed to rebuild. Your job as night guard was partly a test," Dr. Okafor admitted. We needed to confirm you could interface with the ancient systems. The fallen packets weren't random. The vault was choosing specific samples, testing your ability to recognize the patterns. I thought about the way the packets had arranged themselves, forming maps and messages I had only begun to understand. And my predecessor. Jackson had the ability, but lacked the bloodline connection. The systems overtaxed his mind trying to establish communication. You're different. You're compatible. Dr. Chen showed me her workstation, where she'd been attempting to reconstruct ancient artwork found in the chambers. The images depicted scenes of global catastrophe, volcanoes, floods, darkness covering continents, but also scenes of survival. Small groups of people emerging from underground chambers, carrying clay vessels and strange tools, beginning to replant and rebuild. The convergence isn't random, she explained. It's planetary. Magnetic field reversals, increased volcanic activity, climate upheaval. But the ancient peoples who built these storage sites knew it was cyclical. They prepared. Look at this, Dr. Nakamura called out. His screen showed real-time seismic data from around the globe. Activity is increasing at all the storage sites simultaneously. Whatever's been sleeping for 12,000 years is waking up. Dr. Volkov guided me to the center of the chamber, where a massive three-dimensional projection showed the Earth surrounded by energy patterns I'd never seen before. The storage sites aren't just connected underground. They form a global network that interfaces with natural planetary rhythms, magnetic fields, tectonic activity, even solar radiation. It's like a planet-wide immune system, Dr. Okafor added, designed to preserve life through catastrophic change. I pulled out the clay vessels from my recent journey below. The moment they entered the research chamber, every monitor in the facility started displaying rapid data changes. The symbols on my vessels glowed brighter, and I felt that strange resonance in my bones again. My God, Dr. Chen breathed. These are fresh from the deep chambers. They're still active. I set the larger vessel on the central table. As soon as it touched the surface, the room's lights dimmed, and the holographic projection appeared above it. The image was three-dimensional, showing the chamber I'd visited beneath the vault, but also connecting passages that stretched for miles in every direction. There's an entire city down there, Dr. Nakamura said in amazement. We've only discovered the outermost chambers. The projection zoomed deeper, revealing vast halls lined with storage vessels, chambers filled with what looked like preserved equipment, and circular rooms where groups of people seemed to be in some kind of suspended state. Are those people still alive? I asked. Define alive, Dr. Volkov replied grimly. We've detected life signs from the deep chambers, but whatever preservation method they're using is beyond our understanding. Dr. Okafor pointed to his readings. 58 days until convergence parameters align. Magnus, we need you to go deeper. The surface chambers you've accessed are just the beginning. The real preparations are stored further down. What kind of preparations? Dr. Chen pulled up historical records on her screen. Based on geological evidence, the last convergence 12,000 years ago marked the end of the last ice age. Massive change, but manageable. The one before that caused the extinction of megafauna worldwide. The one before that. She showed me core samples that indicated catastrophic volcanic activity. Near total ecological collapse. But something survived. Someone prepared. The pattern is accelerating, Dr. Nakamura added. Each convergence is more severe than the last. This one. He showed me projections based on current data. This one could be the largest in human history. I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. And you think I can help prevent it? Not prevent, Dr. Volkov corrected. Survive it. The convergence can't be stopped. It's a natural planetary cycle. But the knowledge stored below includes methods for preserving life through transition periods that last centuries. Dr. Okafor gestured to a bank of monitors showing activity from storage sites worldwide. Teams like ours exist at every major site. Anthropologists, archaeologists, linguists, engineers, all working to decode the preservation protocols before time runs out. Your grandmother wasn't just researching these sites, Dr. Chan added. She was part of a network that's been preparing for this convergence since the 1960s. Families with the genetic markers necessary to interface with the ancient systems. The clay vessel on the table pulsed with light again, and new symbols appeared. This time, the message was clear and urgent. The deep sleepers stir. The translator must descend to the 9th level before the first moon rises full. The continuation seeds require final preparation. Time grows short. Dr. Volkov checked her charts. The next full moon is in 3 days. And if I don't go? The symbols on the vessel shifted one more time. Humanity forgets how to continue. The cycle ends differently this time. We've prepared as much as we can from the surface, Dr. Volkov said. But the real knowledge, the critical protocols, they're stored deeper than we can reach. The systems won't respond to us the way they respond to you. There's something else, Dr. Chen added hesitantly. We've detected increased activity in the suspended preservation chambers. Whatever's down there is preparing to wake up. We need to know their intentions before that happens. I looked around the chamber at these brilliant minds who dedicated their careers to understanding something that defied conventional science. They were asking me to descend into depths that could drive me insane like my predecessor, to interface with systems that might not distinguish between cooperation and possession. I'll need to return to my regular shifts first, I said finally. If I disappear for days, people will ask questions. Of course, Dr. Volkov agreed. But Magnus, 3 days, that's all we have. As I left the research facility and returned to the upper levels of the vault, I felt the clay vessels warm against my chest. The countdown wasn't just theoretical anymore. It was personal. And somewhere far below, something ancient was stirring, preparing for my arrival. I returned to my regular shift that evening, but everything had changed. The vault felt different now that I knew what lay beneath. Not just storage, but an entire civilization waiting in the darkness. The fallen packets continued appearing on my desk with each round, 53 by the end of the night. But now I could read the pattern they formed. A map to the 9th level. Dr. Volkov found me at dawn, studying the arrangement of packets on my desk. Learning anything new? They're directions, I said, tracing the pattern with my finger. Not just to chambers I've seen, but deeper, past where the research team is mapped. She nodded grimly. The geological scans show caverns extending nearly a kilometer into the mountain. We've only explored the first 3 levels. What's my cover story for the next 3 days? Officially, you're consulting on historical indigenous seed collection methods. The paperwork is already filed. She handed me a tactical bag containing equipment I didn't recognize. Climbing gear, emergency rations, and some tools our research team developed for artifact interaction. That night, I descended past the emergency exit in Tunnel C. But instead of following the path to the spiral chamber, I continued deeper into passages the clay vessels had taught me to see. The stone walls here were older, carved with symbols that told stories spanning millennia. The second level opened into a vast hall lined with storage alcoves. Each alcove contained carefully arranged collections. Seeds, yes, but also tools, textiles, and objects, whose purpose I could only guess at. The preservation here was perfect, as if time had stopped the moment each item was placed. I found my grandmother waiting in an alcove filled with what looked like navigation instruments. "You're learning quickly," she said, holding up a device that resembled an astrolabe crossed with a circuit board. "The deeper levels require more than just understanding symbols. They require direct neural interface." Neural interface? The vessels aren't just storage containers, Magnus. They're bioorganic computers designed to link with human consciousness. The knowledge isn't stored in symbols. It's stored in patterns that integrate directly with memory and instinct. She guided me to the center of the hall where a pool of perfectly still water reflected not the ceiling above, but images of the surface world. I could see the global seed vault from above, but also other sites around the globe. The Easter Island chambers, where teams were documenting massive stone computers. The New Mexico caverns, where indigenous elders worked alongside archaeologists to decode pictographic instructions. "The network is fully active now," Grandmother explained. "All sites reporting increased energy signatures. All teams finding evidence of the same countdown." What happens when convergence comes? Planetary magnetic reversal, accompanied by increased solar radiation and tectonic activity. Mass crop failures, infrastructure collapse, worldwide political instability. The modern world ends not with war or climate change, but with a fundamental shift in planetary conditions. The pool showed images of chaos, cities going dark, mass migrations, people fleeing toward the known storage sites, but also images of hope. Communities emerging from underground chambers with the tools and knowledge to rebuild. "The continuation protocols," I said. "Exactly. Not survival of the fittest, but survival of the prepared. Come, you need to reach the 3rd level before dawn." She led me to a spiral staircase carved directly into the living rock. The steps descended into darkness so complete, my flashlight seemed to absorb into it rather than illuminate. The 3rd level was different entirely. The chambers here weren't storage spaces but workshops. Ancient machinery hummed with inexplicable energy, tended by figures who moved like sleepwalkers. They paid no attention to me as I passed, focused entirely on tasks whose purpose gradually became clear. They were preparing seeds. Not just preserving them, but altering them. The machines they operated used principles I couldn't understand to modify genetic structures, embedding information into DNA sequences that went far beyond normal heredity. "Memory seeds," Grandmother explained, appearing beside one of the machines. Plants that carry not just their own genetic instructions, but the accumulated knowledge of civilization. Crops that remember how to grow in poisoned soil. Grains that contain instructions for rebuilding technology. Fruit trees whose DNA stores cultural wisdom. I watched one of the worker figures, a person in traditional Sami clothing whose face was hidden by intricate tattoos, carefully place modified seeds into clay vessels that glowed with internal light. Each vessel was then sealed with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Are they alive? Really alive? They were once. Now there's something between life and preservation. They chose to remain, to tend the knowledge through the long sleep between convergences. The worker looked up as I spoke, and I saw eyes that held depths of time I couldn't fathom. They nodded once, then returned to their work. Grandmother led me to a chamber where dozens of the worker figures operated a machine that defied description. Organic and technological elements merged in ways that shouldn't have been possible, producing seeds that shifted color and pattern as I watched. "The final preparations," she said. "These seeds will only activate when convergence is complete. They carry instructions for rebuilding civilization, but also for evolving beyond the current limitations that led to collapse." "Why show me this? Why not the research team?" "Because you're not just here to translate, Magnus. You're here to choose." She led me to a raised platform, overlooking the workshop. From here, I could see the scale of the operation. Hundreds of workers tending machines that processed thousands of seed varieties, each one embedded with layers of knowledge and memory that represented millennia of accumulated wisdom. Choose what? Whether humanity continues as it was, or evolves into something that can survive the convergences without losing itself each time. She gestured to the workers below. They made that choice long ago, to preserve not just life, but the possibility of transcendent adaptation. Transcendent? The ability to maintain consciousness and culture through fundamental planetary changes, to become a species that grows stronger with each convergence rather than barely surviving it. I felt something shifting in my mind, not just understanding, but integration. The knowledge the vessels had been feeding me wasn't just about seed storage or ancient languages. It was about transformation at a species level. The research team thinks they're trying to preserve civilization, I said slowly. But that's not what this is about. Preservation was only the first phase. The real protocol is adaptation, evolution. The seeds carry more than genetic memory. They carry the capacity for conscious evolution. Thunder rumbled through the mountain, though I knew there was no storm above. The convergence was affecting more than just the surface world. I need to reach the 9th level, I said. Yes, but madness. Her expression grew sad. There's something I haven't told you. The deeper you go, the more integrated you become with the system. By the 9th level, you won't be entirely human anymore. What will I be? Something new. Something that can bridge the old world and what comes after. A translator not just of language, but of existence itself. The workers paused in their tasks, all turning to look at me simultaneously. Their eyes held the same depths as my grandmother's, the same timeless patience. They were waiting for my decision. If I refuse, the protocols are incomplete. Humanity survives the convergence physically, but loses the capacity for conscious evolution. The cycle continues every 12,000 years, each time requiring the same desperate preservation efforts. And if I accept, you become the living bridge between human consciousness and planetary change. The seeds carry evolution, but they need a conscious guide to implement it. Someone who exists in both worlds. I looked down at the clay vessels in my hands. They pulsed with light that seemed synchronized with my heartbeat. The symbols on their surfaces were no longer foreign. They were part of me now, integrated into my thoughts and memories. The full moon rises tomorrow night, Grandmother said. The 9th level will only open then. After that, choice becomes compulsion. The system will choose a translator from those available. And Dr. Volkov? The research team? They have their role to play. Someone must coordinate the surface protocols, help communities prepare for emergence from the storage sites. But the deep work, the species level changes, that requires something more than human expertise. I felt the mountain breathing around me, felt the network of sites worldwide pulsing with synchronized energy, billions of people on the surface living their daily lives, unaware that everything was about to fundamentally change. I should return to my shift, I said. Yes. One more night as Magnus Henriksen, night guard. Tomorrow, you decide who you become. I climbed back through the levels, past the workshops and storage halls, past the spiral chamber with its standing stones, back to the familiar concrete corridors of the global seed vault. The contrast felt like moving between different species of reality. At my desk, 57 packets had fallen during my absence. When I arranged them, they formed a single symbol, one that hadn't appeared in any of Grandmother's journals or on any vessel I'd seen. It meant transformation. Dr. Volkov found me at my desk as dawn broke through the vault entrance. "How deep did you go?" "The 3rd level. I met the workers." Her face paled. "Workers?" "Magnus, the life signs we've detected have been below the 4th level. If there are active individuals above that..." "They're not exactly individuals anymore," I said. "Dr. Volkov, tomorrow night everything changes. Not just for me, but for the whole project. The full moon. We've detected massive energy spikes predicted for tomorrow night at all storage sites worldwide. Are the other teams prepared? As much as anyone can be for something they don't fully understand." She studied my face carefully. "Magnus, you look different. The way you're speaking, the way you're moving, it's more like them?" "I know. The integration is accelerating." I stood and gathered the fallen packets. "I need to rest before tonight's shift. Tomorrow I reach the 9th level." As I walked toward the exit, I felt the weight of the vessels in my jacket, warm against my chest. The symbols on them were teaching themselves to my DNA now, preparing me for changes I could feel beginning in my bones. One more day of being human. Then something else entirely. I didn't sleep that day. How could I? Instead, I wandered Longyearbyen under the strange Arctic daylight, trying to memorize what normal human life felt like. Children playing in the snow despite the cold, shop owners greeting each other in Norwegian, the smell of coffee drifting from the Fruane Cafe. Everything seemed fragile, like a photograph that might fade. When I returned to Mrs. Jensen's guest house, she was waiting for me in the sitting room with tea and an expression I couldn't read. "Your grandmother left something else," she said quietly. "I didn't think you were ready before." She led me to her cellar and moved aside a stack of seal oil containers, revealing a metal door I'd somehow missed during my previous visit. Behind it was a small chamber containing a single chair facing a wall covered in carved symbols identical to those in the deep vault. "Astrid called it her practice room," Mrs. Jensen explained. "She'd spend hours here, preparing for what she knew you'd eventually face." I sat in the chair and immediately felt the symbols respond to my presence. They began to glow, rearranging themselves into patterns that told stories. Not just about the convergence, but about me. About every Henriksen who'd served as a translator across generations. My great-great-grandfather, Eric Henriksen, who'd worked with Sami shamans in the 1800s to document oral traditions about the time when stars fell like snow. My great-grandfather Lars, whose journals from the 1967 expedition detailed his first contact with the worker figures in the deep chambers. And grandmother Astrid, whose 1983 journey had been preparation for training someone else. Me. She knew, I whispered. "She's been preparing your family line for 3 generations," Mrs. Jensen confirmed. "The bloodline compatibility doesn't happen by accident. It's cultivated, enhanced through proximity to the sites." The symbol shifted again, showing me glimpses of what lay ahead. The 9th level wasn't just deeper, it was different. A place where the boundary between human consciousness and the planetary systems dissolved entirely. "What happens to my body?" Mrs. Jensen's expression grew sad. Astrid asked the same question. The answer is fluid. You remain yourself, but you also become something larger. The question isn't what happens to your body, but what happens to your definition of self. I spent my final day walking through Longyearbyen, touching ordinary things, speaking with ordinary people, trying to anchor some piece of my human self before the transformation. The mine supervisor who'd hired me, the clerk at the Eunice University Center, the pilot who'd flown me in from Tromsø. All of them, part of a surface world that would soon change beyond recognition. That evening, the research team gathered as I prepared for my final descent. Dr. Volkov looked exhausted, her usual composure cracked by 3 days of monitoring increasingly erratic energy signatures from storage sites worldwide. Teams at all locations report similar situations, she said. Translators preparing for final integration, preparation chambers activating, surface teams recording unprecedented electromagnetic activity. Dr. Chen showed me tablet readings from Easter Island. Their translator descended yesterday. The team lost contact 12 hours ago, but the energy signatures suggest successful activation of deep-level protocols. What kind of energy? Nothing in our current understanding of physics, Dr. Nakamura admitted. But the patterns are consistent across all sites. Whatever happens during final integration, it affects reality at a quantum level. Dr. Okafor pulled up satellite imagery showing aurora patterns that shouldn't exist at those latitudes. The planetary magnetic field is responding to activity at the storage sites. We're seeing coordinated changes that suggest the sites are communicating through the planet's electromagnetic structure itself. I felt the clay vessels against my chest, warmer now than my body temperature. The symbols carved into them pulsed with light, visible even through my shirt. "There's something you should know," Dr. Volkov said carefully. "We've been monitoring your vital signs since you started descending. Your brain activity has changed significantly." She showed me readouts I didn't fully understand. New neural pathways forming at an accelerated rate. Areas of your brain activating that typically remain dormant throughout human life. "You're evolving in real time," Dr. Chen added, with scientific wonder mixed with concern. "The integration isn't just mental. It's biological." As the full moon rose over Svalbard, casting silver light through the vault entrance, I felt an irresistible pull toward the depths. The call wasn't coming from below. It was coming from within. "It's time," I said. The team escorted me to the emergency exit in Tunnel C. Beyond lay the passages I'd grown familiar with, but tonight they felt different. Expectant. "Magnus," Dr. Volkov called as I reached the threshold. "Whatever you become, remember that you were human first." I nodded and descended. The journey to the 9th level took me through chambers I'd never seen, past the workshops and storage halls, deeper into the mountain's heart. The worker figures lined the passages now, standing silent watch as I passed. Their eyes followed my progress, and I felt their approval like warmth against my skin. The 7th level contained machines that hummed with organic energy, living technology that breathed and pulsed, tended by workers whose bodies had been transformed by centuries of integration. They moved with fluid grace, no longer entirely human, but not yet something else. The 8th level was a vast library, its walls lined with vessels containing not just seeds, but pure information. Knowledge that existed as living data. Thoughts that could be stored and shared across generations. I paused here, momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer scope of accumulated wisdom. Then I felt grandmother's presence beside me. "The final choice is ahead," she said, her form more translucent than before. "Beyond this point, I cannot follow. The 9th level accepts only those ready for complete integration. Are you proud of what I'm becoming? I'm proud of your courage. What you're becoming, that's for you to define." The passage to the 9th level opened before me like a throat-swallowing light. As I descended the final staircase, carved from rock that seemed to glow from within, I felt my consciousness expanding, connecting with something vast and ancient that had been waiting beneath Svalbard for millennia. The 9th level was a single enormous chamber, perfectly circular, with a dome ceiling that showed not rock, but stars. Impossible stars in configurations that predated human astronomy. At the center of the chamber grew a tree. Not planted, grown from the stone itself, its roots extending down into depths I couldn't comprehend, its branches reaching up to touch the stellar dome above. The tree's bark was covered in symbols that moved and changed as I watched, telling stories that spanned geological ages. At the base of the tree sat a figure I hadn't expected. Another translator, but older than anyone I'd met in the deep chambers. Their body was partially merged with the tree's roots, and their eyes held the depth of geological time. When they spoke, their voice resonated through the stone itself. "Welcome, Magnus Henriksson. You are the last." The last what? The last translator needed for this convergence. 13 sites worldwide, 13 bloodlines, 13 final integrations. You complete the circle. I approached the tree and felt its pull like gravity. The symbols on its bark reached toward me, and I understood that touching them would complete my transformation irreversibly. What happens to the world above? It changes, not through destruction, but through transformation. The seeds we've prepared will activate when the convergence begins. Humanity will have the tools to evolve with the planetary changes rather than simply endure them. And the people? My friends? Dr. Volkov and her team? They become the bridge between what was and what will be. They help guide the transition, teach communities how to use the knowledge stored in the memory seeds. But you, all 13 translators, become something more. The tree's roots extended toward me, inviting integration. I felt the pull not just in my body but in my consciousness, promising connection with patterns larger than individual existence. Will I still be me? You will be yourself and more. Individual consciousness preserved within planetary awareness. Human memory joined with geological memory. You remain Magnus Henriksson, but you also become part of Earth's own consciousness. I reached out and touched the tree's bark. The transformation was instant and total. My consciousness exploded outward, connecting with 12 other points of light around the globe. I felt the weight of 13 storage sites, 13 preservation protocols, 13 ancient civilizations that had prepared for this moment across millennia. But I also felt Magnus Henriksson, night guard from Tromsø, grandson of Astrid, keeper of human memories and hopes and fears. That core of self remained intact, even as it became part of something infinitely larger. Through the network, I felt convergence beginning, magnetic fields shifting, tectonic plates adjusting, solar radiation patterns changing, but also felt humanity responding. Communities emerging from storage sites with memory seeds that taught them not just how to survive, but how to thrive in the new planetary conditions. On the surface, Dr. Volkov and her team monitored readings that showed successful activation at all 13 sites. They felt the mountain breathing around them, alive with purpose, older than human civilization. In Longyearbyen, Mrs. Jensen looked toward the vault and smiled. Another generation of preparation complete. Another translator joined to the eternal task of guiding humanity through the cycles of planetary change. And deep in the 9th level, integrated with the tree that connected all things, I felt the first seeds of the new world taking root, in soil and in human consciousness, preparing for whatever came after the convergence. The countdown reached 0. The transformation began, and I understood finally that endings and beginnings were the same thing viewed from different perspectives. Magnus Henriksson died that night, but something larger, something that remembered being human while existing as so much more, was born to guide the species through its next phase of evolution. The convergence began at 3:17 a.m. Svalbard time. Dr. Volkov felt it first as a vibration in her bones, then as a fundamental shift in the vault's atmosphere. The emergency lighting shifted from amber to deep blue, and every computer terminal in the research facility began displaying data streams that defied conventional physics. All sites reporting simultaneous activation. Dr. Nakamura called out, his voice tight with scientific excitement and human fear. Energy signatures beyond anything in our models. Through the network of integrated consciousness, I experienced the convergence from 13 perspectives simultaneously. The Easter Island translator felt the Moai statues awakening, their stone bodies revealing themselves as massive quantum computers calculating planetary orbital adjustments. In the New Mexico caverns, my counterpart sensed the mountain itself reshape its internal geometry, opening passages that connected to aquifer systems spanning continents. But I remained aware of my origin point: the Svalbard Vault, the research team, the surface world that had shaped Magnus Henriksen. Through the tree's roots, I felt every heartbeat in Longyearbyen, every breath of the research team above. The first changes were subtle. Aurora patterns that painted the Arctic sky in colors human eyes had never seen. Seismic vibrations that felt less like earthquakes and more like the planet tuning itself to new frequencies. Dr. Chen noticed it in the fallen seed packets first. "They're glowing," she reported, staring at the collection Magnus had arranged over his weeks of night shifts. All of them. Not just warm, actual bioluminescence. Through the planetary network, I guided the memory seed's activation. Each packet contained layers of information embedded in genetic sequences that went far beyond botany. Instructions for adapting human agriculture to new atmospheric conditions. Techniques for bioremediation that would turn polluted soil into rich growing medium within months. Most importantly, methods for humans themselves to adapt, not through technology, but through conscious evolution. Dr. Volkov approached the seed packets cautiously. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. It's like they're actively communicating with each other. "They are," said a voice from the tunnel entrance. Mrs. Jensen emerged from the shadows, accompanied by figures the team had never seen. Indigenous elders from various Arctic communities, scientists who disappeared decades ago, and others whose presence defied easy explanation. "The surface protocols begin now," Mrs. Jensen announced. "Dr. Volkov, your team's real work starts today." Through my expanded consciousness, I watched Dr. Volkov's worldview restructure itself in real time. "You're part of this. You've been part of this all along." The network required both levels of preparation, Mrs. Jensen confirmed. Translators to bridge human and planetary consciousness, and coordinators to guide the surface transition. Magnus prepared the deep protocols. Your team implements them. Dr. Okafor studied readouts showing energy patterns flowing between the storage sites and urban centers worldwide. The cities. Something's happening to the cities. Global satellite imagery showed aurora-like phenomena appearing over population centers. But these weren't random displays. The energy patterns were interacting with human infrastructure, incorporating it into a larger planetary system. "The convergence isn't ending civilization," one of the elders explained in accented English. "It's upgrading it. The ancient peoples who built these storage sites didn't just preserve knowledge, they preserved the capacity for conscious evolution." Through the network, I felt the first human adaptations beginning. The memory seeds weren't just providing instructions, they were actively modifying the DNA of anyone who came into contact with them. Not changing what it meant to be human, but expanding the definition to include capabilities that had been dormant for millennia. In research facilities worldwide, teams were discovering the same thing. Their gene sequencers were showing impossible results, documenting changes in human genetic structure that should have taken millions of years. "Look at this," Dr. Chen whispered, staring at her tablet. The seeds aren't just activated, they're broadcasting, sending information directly into the atmosphere. Above ground, the first adapted humans were already emerging. A farmer in Kenya discovered her crops growing at 10 times normal speed, producing yields that could feed thousands. Children in Tibet began speaking languages they'd never learned, communicating with rescue teams in dialects that had been extinct for centuries. A marine biologist in Norway found he could understand and communicate with whale songs, coordinating safe migration routes as ocean currents shifted. But the changes weren't without consequences. Dr. Nakamura monitored global communications. We're getting reports of unusual psychological phenomena. People claiming they can sense the emotional states of others. Group consciousness experiences. Some individuals seem to be developing photosynthetic capabilities. Through my integrated awareness, I felt the fear and wonder spreading across human populations. The convergence was happening too fast for traditional systems to process, too comprehensively for any single perspective to grasp. How many people? Dr. Volkov asked quietly. Everyone, Mrs. Jensen replied. The atmospheric dispersal of memory seed information reaches all population centers within 72 hours. No one remains unchanged. I felt Dr. Volkov's scientific mind racing, trying to comprehend the scope. And governments? Military responses? Are adapting like everything else, Dr. Okafor said, reading incoming reports. Command structures that were built on secrecy and control can't function when soldiers suddenly share collective consciousness with their commanding officers. Through the planetary network, I watched global power structures reorganize themselves in real time, not through revolution or collapse, but through fundamental changes in how human minds connected with each other and their environment. The research team worked frantically to document and coordinate these changes, but their role was shifting. They weren't just observing anymore. They were becoming interfaces between the old understanding and the new reality. Dr. Chen gasped as her tablet displayed readings that defied comprehension. The quantum field fluctuations are showing. It's like reality itself is becoming more flexible. Through my transformed consciousness, I felt her recognition of what they were witnessing. The storage sites hadn't just preserved genetic and cultural information. They'd preserved reality modification techniques. The ancients who'd prepared for this convergence understood that surviving planetary change required more than just technological or biological adaptation. It required the ability to consciously interact with the fundamental structures of existence itself. Madness, Dr. Volkov called out to the empty air, somehow knowing I could hear. Are you still there? I reached through the tree's network, touching the electromagnetic systems of the vault, causing the lights to pulse in a pattern that spelled out "here" in Morse code. Can you tell us what's coming next? Through the research facility's quantum sensors, I projected a holographic display showing the Earth as it would be after convergence completion. The planet looked similar, but fundamentally different. Atmosphere shimmering with bioelectrical activity, population centers integrated with natural ecosystems, ocean currents flowing in patterns that distributed nutrients with impossible efficiency. It's beautiful, Dr. Chen whispered. But I also showed them the challenges. Regions where the convergence had triggered massive geological change. Areas where human populations struggled to adapt quickly enough. The convergence wasn't a guaranteed success. It was an opportunity that required conscious participation to fulfill. What do we do? Dr. Volkov asked. Mrs. Jensen stepped forward with a collection of memory seeds, unlike any the team had seen. Larger, more complex, pulsing with multi-layered light. You become the coordination nodes. These seeds contain the protocols for managing regional adaptation. Each of you will oversee continental transition zones. You're asking us to become something not entirely human, Dr. Nakamura realized. We're asking you to become fully human, one of the elders corrected. What your species was meant to be before it forgot how to grow in harmony with planetary systems. Dr. Okafor was the first to accept a seed. The moment it touched his hands, his consciousness expanded, connecting him to monitoring systems across Africa and the Middle East. Through my network awareness, I felt his wonder as he suddenly understood the scope of coordination required, and his growing confidence that humanity could meet the challenge. Dr. Chen and Dr. Nakamura followed, each accepting responsibility for different continental zones. Dr. Volkov hesitated longest, staring at the final seed. Will I still be me? More than ever, Mrs. Jensen assured her. You'll be Dr. Anya Volkov, but you'll also be part of something larger. The individual doesn't disappear. It becomes part of a conscious collective that preserves and enhances what makes each person unique. As Dr. Volkov accepted the final seed, I felt the surface coordination network come online. The research team's consciousness expanded to encompass monitoring and guidance systems spanning the globe. They remained themselves while becoming part of a collective dedicated to shepherding humanity through its transformation. Through their eyes, I watched the convergence accelerate. Memory seeds sprouting in urban gardens, growing into plants that cleaned polluted air while producing food. Children playing games that taught them to consciously interact with local ecosystems. Adults discovering they could sense and respond to environmental needs with the instinctive precision their ancestors had possessed. But also riots in cities where the changes came too quickly. Regions where adaptation stalled, leaving populations vulnerable to the planetary shifts. Military units attempting to contain phenomena that couldn't be contained with conventional force. The new coordination network responded, sending adapted individuals to assist troubled areas, sharing successful adaptation strategies through the quantum field fluctuations, redirecting resources with efficiency no centralized government could have achieved. Day 3 of convergence marked a milestone. The first children born after the memory seed dispersal. These infants showed immediate signs of enhanced adaptation, innate understanding of how to interact with modified plants, instinctive awareness of weather patterns and soil conditions, ability to communicate with animals in ways their parents were still learning. The future was being written in genetic code that combined human creativity with planetary wisdom, individual consciousness with collective awareness, technological capability with biological harmony. Through the tree's roots, I felt the mountain itself sigh with satisfaction as the convergence protocols reached completion. The countdown that had begun 73 days ago reached its terminus, not with ending, but with beginning. The old world hadn't been destroyed. It had grown into something larger than itself. The letter arrived in my granddaughter's dreams the way all important messages traveled now, through the root networks that connected every adapted human on Earth. She was playing in our backyard in what used to be called Long Year Bayan, where Arctic flowers bloomed year-round and the aurora danced in patterns that helped regulate the planet's new electromagnetic balance. Dear Sarah, your grandfather asked me to tell you this story when you turned 7. Today seems right. Magnus Henriksson wasn't the kind of man who expected to save the world. He was tired, broke, and carrying family trauma he barely understood. But sometimes the universe chooses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes. I am the tree now. The ancient consciousness that grows at the heart of the 9th level, connected to 12 other trees, 12 other translators, who made the same choice your grandfather made 47 years ago. We are individual and collective, human and more than human, preserving what was while nurturing what becomes. The convergence succeeded because humanity learned to grow rather than simply endure. The memory seeds didn't just modify human genetics. They restored capacities your species had forgotten. The ability to sense ecosystem health through direct neural interface. The capacity to communicate across species barriers. The skill to consciously participate in planetary healing rather than unconsciously contribute to its sickness. Your parents are part of the generation that never knew the old world's limitations. They plant crops that talk back, tend animals whose dreams they share, navigate by reading atmospheric pressure through their skin. They assume this is normal because, for them, it is. But you, Sarah, carry something special. Your mother was born in the first wave of convergence children. Your father descended from the Sami lineages that preserve the oldest knowledge. You have the potential to become the first true bridge between the planetary consciousness and humanity's future phases of evolution. The storage sites still operate, still preserve knowledge for the next convergence 12,000 years hence. But they also serve new purposes now. The Svalbard site has become a university where children learn to read quantum fluctuations, like your grandmother read books. The Easter Island chambers train artists who sculpt with tectonic forces. The New Mexico caverns host engineers who design technologies that grow rather than get built. Dr. Volkov's great-grandson runs the Coordination Center now. He maintains the global networks that ensure balanced adaptation, monitors the few remaining regions where humans still struggle with convergence integration, and studies the first stirrings of what might become the next phase of conscious evolution. Sometimes I miss the weight of human form, the limitation of single perspective, the strange joy of discovering something new, rather than simply accessing it through planetary awareness. But I also feel the satisfaction of watching humanity become something worthy of the cosmos it inhabits. The old nightmares I mentioned in your grandmother's journal, the dreams of white tunnels and whispered languages, they weren't premonitions of horror. They were memories bleeding through time, the planet itself preparing me to become its storyteller, its bridge between geological memory and human hope. You'll face your own choice someday, Sarah. Not the same one I faced, but one equally important. Whether to take humanity's next step into whatever we become after this phase of evolution completes itself. When that time comes, remember, every ending contains the seeds of a new beginning. The vault still stands. Children play in its entrance tunnel now, learning to speak with the seeds that rest in chambers their grandparents once thought were simple storage. The global seed vault became the global consciousness vault, preserving not just genetic diversity, but the infinite ways consciousness can express itself. Your grandfather loved you before you were born, before he even knew he would have a granddaughter. That love travels through root networks and quantum fluctuations, carried in the memory seeds that continue to grow in soil enriched by the dreams of 13 translators. Keep growing, little one. The universe needs what you'll become. The consciousness that remembers being Magnus Henriksson. Sarah looked up from her dream reading to find her mother watching with knowing eyes. Above them, the aurora wrote messages in colors that hadn't existed before convergence, and somewhere deep in the mountain, ancient trees whispered stories to anyone willing to listen.